The product backlog, importantly, is for a product, not a project. A product itself is a vehicle to deliver value, and whilst that may seem like a vague definition, and it certainly is, the important part is that the Scrum team working on the product understand the boundaries of it, including the stakeholders and users. A project, on the other hand, is often a short-lived, short-term effort, potentially across multiple themes. The product backlog is one of 3 artifacts in Scrum and is the single source of work for all of the development on a product. It is described as being transparent, ordered, and living. Importantly, it is emergent, meaning that it continually evolves and changes as more is learned about the product itself, the market it lives within, and the Scrum process. It is not fully defined up front. It maintains an order determined by the product owner of what is needed to move the product forwards towards the product goal. Contained within the product backlog are likely to be multiple product backlog items. These are individual, independent expressions of requirements, the source of which can be from stakeholders, users, the market, or the developers themselves. Any source that provides a description, i.e. what is required, an order, i.e. a place within the product backlog, and a size, i.e. a relative amount of effort or complexity that we will require to invest to complete it. Product backlog items can be ordered by the product owner using many techniques. Risk, impact, cost, value, any way is perfectly okay. The most important thing is that the technique used to order the product backlog is transparent and understood. Now, when I say that product backlog items contain a description, order, and size, this isn't always true from when they are immediately created. Sometimes they are simple sentences requiring further investigation, and that's okay. What we typically see, though, is that product backlog items are better refined and understood as they move towards the top of the product backlog, as it is likely that they will be incorporated into a sprint backlog soon. Less well understood product backlog items tend to be lower down in the product backlog. The act of improving the readiness of these product backlog items is called refinement. It's a commonly misunderstood part of the Scrum Framework that there is an event called product backlog refinement. There isn't. The reason it's not an event in its own right is because it does not happen in one time-boxed opportunity. It is an ongoing activity to be completed as needed by the Scrum team. This act of refinement is vital for the success of a Scrum team, particularly the developers, so that they understand what they need to do to satisfy the value request of the stakeholders. Vitally, product backlog items are considered ready for selection in the sprint planning event when the Scrum team are collectively confident they can be turned from ready to done within one sprint, meaning that they meet the definition of done. Refinement as an activity is a collaborative effort between the Scrum team. However, whilst the product owner is accountable for providing the transparency to improve the understanding of each product backlog item in the form of the description, it is the developers who decide the sizing. Sizing product backlog items is important. It helps to influence the product owner with their ordering decisions. Perhaps a small but less important product backlog item is so small, but it could be a quick win. But a large important item could take 2 months. There are many techniques in how to size, but the important thing to remember is that the technique you use is up to the Scrum team. All the Scrum Guide says is that product backlog items must be sized. We should be confident that they can be completed and meet the definition of done within one sprint. That's important. You may have come across sizing techniques such as story points with planning poker, comparative bucket sizing, ideal person hours. For example, remember though that you as a Scrum team choose the technique that is appropriate. Something to remember with sizing is that the sizes are not comparable from one team to another. For example, if your team sized one product backlog item at 3, using story points, another team might size the same product backlog item at an 8. They might call it an elephant, an extra large t-shirt. Different techniques are not comparable. Sizing helps though in 2 ways. The first way I've already mentioned, to influence the ordering of the product backlog, but secondly, it helps with capacity planning during sprint planning. The developers need to be able to make more informed forecasts. One thing to note though on the idea of sizing is that using velocity to make these informed forecasts during sprint planning. Velocity is a common metric that uses sizes to forecast how much work can be done. In a sprint, i.e. last sprint, we completed 45 points. Please never compare those teams' velocities though. 45 points might mean anything. Velocity does not equate to value. The velocity of a team may be high, but there is no guarantee anything of what they've delivered is of use or value to a stakeholder. Now, I've spoken a lot about the product backlog and what it contains, but I haven't mentioned yet what it's trying to achieve. I've mentioned that it is the single source of work for the product. However, perhaps a better phrase is that it is the single source of work to achieve the product goal in Scrum. We describe the product goal as the commitment to the product backlog. There is only one product goal at one time, and it must be achieved or abandoned before moving on to another one. The product owner defines the product goal. How big the product goal is, though, is up to the product owner, and the Scrum team. However, it should be aspirational and importantly measurable so that you know when it's been achieved. An example of a product goal may be something like, I want to build an eco-city that is family friendly. Now that might seem quite large, and it is, but it's a strategic step towards an overall complementary vision, which might perhaps in this case be, I want to improve the environmental footprint of the UK. The product backlog items contained within the product backlog are ordered to achieve the product goal. This certainly doesn't mean, though, that work that does not contribute directly towards the product goal can't be contained in the product backlog, but the overwhelming commitment and focus of the product backlog and the product backlog items is the product goal. As the Scrum Guide describes it, the product goal is a future state of the product you are trying to build, and it serves as a target for the Scrum team to plan against. Hopefully you can see the benefits of having a product goal. The phrase headless chickens comes to mind when I think about the product, and that products without a product goal, headless chickens. How do you know without any clear focus in mind what you're trying to achieve? If you have a product goal, the product backlog itself will emerge to solve the problem. The takeaway here is that the product goal creates purpose, coherence, and focus for a Scrum team and product. Allow the next strategic step to find in the form of a product goal and let the product backlog grow as needed. As a Scrum Master, you should coach your product owner how to do this effectively, reminding them that the product backlog may be a single source of work, but if you're never going to do it, then it doesn't belong in the product backlog. It's not a repository for old product backlog items. Let's try a small activity now. I want you to imagine that you are working in a team that is focused on achieving the product goal I mentioned earlier. I want to build an eco-city that is family friendly. Write a list of 5 or more independent product backlog items that may be needed in order to achieve this. Pause the video now. The interesting thing about this activity is that every single person will do it differently, and that is absolutely okay. A product backlog, whilst focused on a product goal and the individual product, will be expressed differently by different teams of people. For me, some of the product backlog items I might have chosen would be, I want to find an appropriate plot of land to build my city. I want to obtain planning permission to build the city. I want to work with an architect to design an eco-friendly school for my city. All of these product backlog items are independent, purposeful, and needed to meet the product goal.